A veteran police chief thought he was above the law. On the steps of the courthouse, in broad daylight, he confronted a calm black man who refused to back down. With anger boiling over, the chief suddenly raised his hand and slapped him across the face, right in front of shocked bystanders, lawyers, and even his own officers. Phones came out, the crowd gasped, and in that instant the chief believed he had proven his power. But what he didn't realize was that this ordinary man was no ordinary target, and that slap would end his entire career. Before we dive in, make sure you hit like and subscribe because stories like this deserve to be heard. The echo of the slap still lingered in the air as the crowd froze, too stunned to react. The police chief stood tall, chest heaving, a smug grin spreading across his face as if he had just proved a point. The black man didn't flinch, didn't retaliate, didn't even raise his voice. His calm silence only fueled the chief's anger. "Arrest him," the chief barked at the nearest officers, his voice sharp and commanding. "Disorderly conduct. Resisting authority. Put him in cuffs now." Two officers hesitated, glancing nervously at one another. They had seen everything. They knew the man hadn't resisted, hadn't even moved. Still, the power of the badge weighed heavy on their shoulders. The police chief's word, for years, had been law within their ranks. Slowly, reluctantly, they stepped forward with handcuffs. The crowd erupted. "He didn't do anything," one woman shouted, phone still recording. "You assaulted him, not the other way around," another man yelled. Several bystanders closed in, forming a protective circle, but the chief shoved them aside with the arrogance of a man who had never faced consequences. The man, still calm, raised his hands to show he wasn't resisting. Yet his composure only made the chief look smaller, weaker, more desperate to assert dominance. "Look at him," the chief sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Walking around here in his fancy suit, acting like he's better than us. Trash like this doesn't belong here." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The words dripped with prejudice, each syllable soaked in venom. The officers clamped the cuffs on the man's wrists. The sharp click of metal against skin was drowned out by the angry shouts of witnesses. Phones were held high, recording every second, live-streaming the abuse of power to social media. Inside the courthouse, the humiliation continued. The police chief puffed out his chest, striding through the lobby as if parading a trophy. "Book him," he told the sergeant at the desk. "Charges: assault on an officer, resisting arrest, disturbing the peace." The sergeant looked up in disbelief. "Sir, I didn't see any of that." "You don't need to see it," the chief snapped. "You need to write it down. My word is enough." The room fell silent. Clerks, officers, and even civilians waiting for hearings stared at the scene unfolding before them. The man in cuffs said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence spoke louder than any protest. The chief's arrogance only grew. He spun the narrative for anyone who would listen, claiming the man had lunged at him, shouted insults, and tried to push past security. His loyal officers nodded along, their discomfort hidden behind forced agreement. But there was one thing the chief didn't know. Every lie he told, every word he twisted, was already unraveling. Outside, videos of the slap and the false arrest were spreading like wildfire. Inside, whispers grew among the staff. They recognized the man. They knew who he was. The chief thought he had destroyed a nobody's dignity. In reality, he had just destroyed his own career. The courthouse buzzed with whispers as the man in cuffs was led down the hallway. Clerks exchanged knowing looks, attorneys froze mid-conversation, and even the bailiffs seemed uneasy. Something wasn't right. The chief strutted proudly, convinced he had shown strength. He didn't notice the subtle nods of recognition, the respectful glances directed not at him, but at the man he had slapped. Inside the holding area, the man finally spoke, not to argue, not to beg, but with calm authority that silenced the room. "You might want to think carefully about what you're doing, Chief." The word struck harder than the slap had. The sergeant at the desk shifted uncomfortably, his pen hovering above the intake form. The chief scoffed. "Save it. You're just another punk in a suit. You thought you could mouth off to me? Not today. By the time I'm done, you'll be lucky to walk free in a month. The man tilted his head slightly, studying him, as if weighing his arrogance against the inevitable truth. You don't even know who I am, do you? That question landed like a crack of thunder. The room grew still. Clerks froze, eyes darting between the man in cuffs and the chief. Even the younger officers shifted, uneasy. The chief barked out a laugh. Who you are doesn't matter. You're in my custody. That makes me God in this building. The sergeant cleared his throat, his voice hesitant. Chief, with respect, it does matter. I think you should take a second look. Annoyed, the chief snatched the man's wallet from the evidence tray, flipping it open. His smirk vanished in an instant. Inside was a federal judiciary ID badge. Name, Honorable Judge Marcus D. Washington. Position, U.S. District Court Judge. The color drained from the chief's face. His hand trembled slightly as the room erupted in a collective gasp. Judge, one clerk whispered. No way, another muttered. That's him, a bailiff confirmed. He's presided over half the major cases in this district. The chief's throat went dry. He tried to form words, but nothing came out. For years, his power had been absolute, officers obeyed, citizens cowered, and lies went unchallenged. But now? He had slapped and falsely arrested one of the most respected federal judges in the state. Judge Washington didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm authority filled the room. Release me. Now. The sergeant moved instantly, fumbling with the keys, unlocking the cuffs with shaky hands. As the metal clicked open, silence wrapped the room tighter than chains. The officers avoided eye contact, their loyalty unraveling. Judge Washington adjusted his suit jacket, unfazed, and turned to the chief. His words were precise, every syllable a dagger. You've abused your badge for years, but today you made one fatal mistake. You put your hands on the wrong man. The chief staggered back, his once commanding presence shrinking before everyone's eyes. His voice cracked. Judge, it was a misunderstanding, Save it, Judge Washington cut him off. I'll see you in my courtroom. Gasps filled the air. The chief's arrogance collapsed in an instant, replaced with the unmistakable weight of doom. Everyone in that courthouse knew his career wasn't just in danger. It was already over. The following morning, the courthouse was packed. Word had spread like wildfire. The town's police chief had slapped and arrested a federal judge. Reporters lined the steps, cameras rolling, microphones ready. Officers who once followed the chief's every order now kept their distance, whispering in hushed tones. Inside, the tension was suffocating. The bailiff's voice echoed. All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Marcus D. Washington presiding. The very man the chief had humiliated just 24 hours earlier now stepped onto the bench, his black robe flowing with quiet authority. The courtroom fell silent, every eye locked on him. And then, Judge Washington looked directly at the chief. The police chief sat at the defense table, pale, sweating, his badge and gun already confiscated. For the first time in his career, he wasn't the one in control. The judge's voice was calm, but each word cut sharper than steel. Yesterday, this man abused his authority in front of dozens of witnesses. He assaulted a citizen in broad daylight, fabricated charges, and ordered false testimony from his subordinates. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Several officers lowered their heads in shame. Others shifted uncomfortably, refusing to meet the judge's eyes. The judge nodded to the prosecutor. Proceed with evidence. A large screen lit up. Videos recorded by bystanders played for everyone to see. The slap. The false arrest. The chief's venomous words, trash like this doesn't belong here. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The footage was undeniable. The lie was over. Judge Washington let the silence hang heavy. Then he spoke again, his voice resonating with the weight of justice. This court recognizes a blatant abuse of power. When the very person sworn to protect the law chooses to weaponize it, society itself is endangered. This cannot, and will not, be tolerated. The chief stammered, his arrogance now gone, replaced with desperation. Your Honor, I didn't know who you were. It was a misunderstanding. The judge's gavel slammed down, silencing him. You didn't need to know who I was. You should have respected the law. You should have respected the people you serve. But instead, you thought your badge made you untouchable. The words landed like a final sentence. From the bench, Judge Washington made his ruling. Effective immediately, you are suspended from your duties as police chief. An internal investigation and criminal charges will follow. Until then, you will not wear the badge, you will not carry a weapon, and you will not disgrace this court any further. The courtroom erupted. Some applauded. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Reporters scribbled furiously. Officers who once feared their chief now whispered openly about his downfall. The police chief sat frozen, his career collapsing in front of his eyes. In one reckless moment, one slap, everything he had built was gone. Judge Washington rose from the bench, his words final and absolute. No one is above the law. Not even those sworn to uphold it. And with that, the gavel struck. The chief's reign of fear ended not with glory, but with shame. The sound of the gavel still echoed as Judge Washington stepped down from the bench. The chief sat motionless, his once proud posture reduced to a slumped shadow of the man he pretended to be. The badge that had shielded him for decades was gone. His authority stripped. His future uncertain. But the courtroom wasn't finished with him yet. As the reporters swarmed, microphones thrust forward, the prosecutor stood. Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to submit further evidence. Multiple complaints against Chief Donovan were buried or dismissed over the past 5 years. Today's incident is not isolated, it's a pattern. A hush swept over the room. One by one, files were brought forward. Testimonies from citizens who had been bullied, threatened, and falsely charged. Officers who had witnessed corruption but were too afraid to speak until now. Video clips, recordings, statements, each piece another nail in the coffin. The chief's face turned pale, his jaw trembling. The walls he had built to protect himself crumbled in front of the entire community. His own men and women, the ones who once saluted him, now looked away in shame. Judge Washington leaned forward, his voice steady. You didn't just make a mistake yesterday, Chief. You built a career on intimidation, lies, and abuse. Yesterday was only the first time you were caught on camera. The word struck harder than the slap ever could. The chief tried to stand, but his knees buckled under the weight of it all. His attorney whispered frantically, urging him to stay silent, but his pride wouldn't allow it. I served this city for 25 years, he shouted, desperation dripping from every syllable. You can't erase that with one mistake. Judge Washington's eyes locked on him. Cold. Unflinching. One mistake didn't erase your career. You did. Every time you used your badge to harm instead of protect, you carved your own downfall. Yesterday was simply the moment the world saw it for themselves. The crowd stirred, some nodding, some recording, others whispering the judge's words as if they were scripture. The chief's legacy was no longer his to control. In that moment, the irony was undeniable. The man who had slapped another in arrogance was now being slapped down by justice itself, not with hands, but with truth, evidence, and the very system he had once manipulated. As deputies escorted him out of the courtroom, cameras flashed like lightning. Headlines were already being written. Police chief suspended after assaulting federal judge. Years of abuse finally catch up to Chief Donovan. One slap ends entire career. The chief kept his head down, but there was no hiding from what had happened. The world had seen, and the world would not forget. Judge Washington stood tall at the bench, delivering one final statement to those still seated. Let this be a reminder, justice is not blind to power. It doesn't bow to rank, nor does it bend to intimidation. Every man and woman, regardless of their title, is accountable to the law. The gavel struck once more, echoing like thunder. The chief's career, his empire of fear, was finished. And the message was clear: one slap, one moment of arrogance, had destroyed everything. The courtroom slowly emptied, but the weight of what had just unfolded lingered in the air. For years, Chief Donovan had walked with unchecked power, a man who believed his badge made him untouchable, who thought fear was stronger than respect, and that authority could never be questioned. But all it took was a single moment, one slap delivered in arrogance, to strip everything away. Judge Marcus Washington's calm presence proved something the chief had forgotten: true power doesn't come from intimidation, uniforms, or titles. It comes from integrity, from justice, and from standing firm even in the face of abuse. In the end, the chief wasn't just suspended. He was exposed. His lies, his bullying, his corruption, all dragged into the light for everyone to see. He had built a career on fear, and it collapsed the moment the truth stared him in the face. The irony? He believed he was humiliating a stranger. Instead, he humiliated himself before the entire nation. The message was clear, and it spread far beyond that courthouse: abuse of power has consequences. Whether you wear a badge, a robe, or any title of authority, no one is above the law. For the people who watched it unfold, it wasn't just the downfall of a corrupt chief. It was a reminder that justice still works, that silence can be stronger than rage, and that sometimes the calmest man in the room is the most powerful of all. Chief Donovan walked into that courthouse thinking he had ended another man's dignity. Instead, he walked out having ended his own career. And for everyone who ever faced injustice at his hands, the gavel's echo was more than a sound, it was closure. Because in the end, one slap destroyed him.